for the majority of people that do not have chronic disease, the whole preventative process and education it should just be like everything that you do on an everyday basis. If you're planning for retirement, you're putting a little bit of money in a savings account on a monthly basis. It's the same thing with your health. You need to keep it in check, and you need to be looking at what's going on because things evolve.
Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, then hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Rudi Riekstins, and this is the InPowered Life. Welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Riekstins. I'm your host. And if you follow me on the InPowered Life Podcast or you listen to Aniston, you know that we are into health and wellness. And that if you don't have your health, then you don't have anything. And so we love to be able to support you in bringing you people that are leading the charge in what does it look like to live the most empowered life possible. You know, the InPowered Life Podcast is about supporting you and reminding you that you have the power within. And sometimes that's just the decision to live your healthiest life. And that if you have that level of health and well-being, then you have the energy, the stamina, or the longevity to be able to live your highest and your greatest potential. A few of you know that a couple months ago, I got hit with something that was completely debilitating and crippling and brought me to my knees. And it really made me value and appreciate the high level of health and well-being that I have. And so today we're going to be bringing you an expert. His name is Dr. Joel Wussow, and he is the CEO, founder, and creator of Healthspan by Design. And I love the fact that we have so many resources that are available to us today to be able to dive into, to educate ourselves, and then to be able to live a higher life, a high quality of life so that we can have that level of longevity that we're all looking for. So I'm super excited to bring him to the InPowered Life Podcast today to share some of his insights, and more than anything, pique some curiosity in you so that as you listen to this episode, you can ask yourself, where are you showing up for yourself to reach your highest and greatest potential? And what could you take away from this episode today that you could apply to your life so that you can achieve that? So Joel, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the InPowered Life Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Rudi. Appreciate it.
So I know that today you've created Healthspan by Design and support people to live a life, you know, and I'm going to use the word longevity. And I think it's been so overused in the marketplace today if you're going on social media. But, you know, the truth is if we don't have longevity, we don't have anything. And it's not necessarily in how long you live your life, but it's the quality that you're living your life. And that's where you have chosen to put your stake in the sand, so to speak. But you didn't start there. You were an emergency medicine physician. And so I'm super curious, like what made you get into medicine first and foremost? And then what was that transition that took you from emergency medicine to preventative?
Okay, so great question. Well, first and foremost, I still am practicing emergency medicine. I just have kind of switched gears, and this has become, first it was kind of my side job, and now it's just become my baby that I've been grooming, and hopefully potentially I'll be doing that for most of my job in medicine. But right now I still work in the ER. So back to why medicine. I think it stems back to just my curiosity for science ever since I was a little kid. I was doing science fair projects even in kindergarten. So curiosity, science has always just been a passion of mine and wanting to learn more and more. I did have a major in biochemistry in college, you know, with aspirations of potentially going to medical school. I did take a little sidetrack. This was back in 2005, and I did pharmaceutical sales for a little while. And then still had interest of going to medical school. And after interacting with the doctors on a daily basis, I knew that's what I wanted to do. That was going to be the ultimate fulfillment. So that's really just a love for science. And then I just love interacting with people, and I love helping people. And what better way to merge the two together, you know, all of your skills and learning and applying that to helping people get better. So that's where medicine came into play.
So then what was the shift that has, or birthed, if I should say, the baby of wanting to move from emergency medicine? And I don't mean moving necessarily job function. I mean more so your attention and focus of, I'm here to fix and repair. And now I'm going to support people so they don't have to later fix and repair. Because I would argue, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, but that would take two very different mindsets of how you're approaching what you do. And it's such an interesting diversion for somebody that is in emergency care versus somebody that's in preventative care. So what was really that shift or the catalyst that supported you in making that change?
I think the passion's always been there. I've really appreciated an area of medicine called integrative medicine. When I was going through training in medical school, it was still an emerging field. I've always been very proactive, in charge of my own health. And I think seeing what I see on an everyday basis in the ER, patients coming in very sick, and I just see that there's not really going to be a change unless we have a paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift is that we have to take time for education. And unfortunately, our system, being in ER, it's the utmost extreme of the minimum amount of face time you have with a patient. And you're dealing with people that are symptomatic with full-blown chronic disease. So it's very hard to make a shift there. So I think don't get me wrong. I enjoy helping people, making an impact, and working in the ER has its place. And that's something I think I'm always going to want to do. But where I feel like I can provide more impact and I feel like there's more fulfillment is actually being able to sit down and talk to people and help educate them, to empower them so that they understand how disease progresses, because the ER is always going to be there. It's a rotary belt, in and out, revolving door, people always being sick. And at that point, I don't want to say it's too little too late, but it's very difficult at that point. So taking the frustrations that I see on a daily basis, taking care of people that have very poor insight, I wanted to take a different approach to where I could actually make an intervention, counsel people well before it's an uphill battle. And that's really where this all begins. And not that having chronic disease can't be reversed and that people that have chronic disease, they're a lost cause, because that's simply not the case. But what I'm saying is, for the majority of people that do not have chronic disease, or at least they think they don't, the whole preventative process and education it should just be like everything that you do on an everyday basis. If you're planning for retirement, you're putting a little bit of money in a savings account on a monthly basis. It's the same thing with your health. You need to keep it in check, and you need to be looking at what's going on, because things evolve. And it's much easier to stop a snowball much earlier on before it becomes huge. If you can do that early on, then it's just little tweaks here and there, and you can sustain that. And the chronic disease that we see today, it doesn't need to exist. Heart disease, which is the number one killer in the world, can be 100% prevented. Same thing with metabolic disease and diabetes. These things, we can stop them before they develop. It's not a disease of age. And that's what I want to counsel people. And I'm just very passionate about it because I come from a family that doesn't have the best genetics. And if I wasn't on top of these things, despite, optimizing my lifestyle tactics to minimize them, I probably still would be progressing along a path that I don't want to take, especially for heart disease. I have a strong family history of heart disease in my family. My grandfather had his first heart attack at age 38. I'm 41 now, about to be 42. So it's in the genes for me. Obviously, he had some lifestyle choices that accelerated that. But after doing blood work, genetic testing, et cetera, all these things for myself, despite what I thought was living a very healthy lifestyle, still some of the things that I could do to get optimized for lowering my cardiovascular risk were not there. So that's kind of what started this whole path. Focusing on my health and what I can do to optimize it, and what I've learned from there, I feel like I've been able to translate into helping other people.
So my wife and I are really big into, and I want to use a word that again has also been dramatically overused on social media, but biohacking. You know, we are very, very much focused in health and well-being. I jokingly say I want to live until well into 100, 103 years old. I want to be running around on stage with the energy I have today. And you can only do that if you pre-plan how do you want to get there, you know, and that takes into account what I eat. So we don't have seed oil, and, you know, we do stem cell therapy. We've invested probably close to $150,000 in stem cell therapy over the last, year and a half, but that's not sustainable for everybody or feasible for everybody. We do cold plunging, hot and cold immersion, infrared sauna. Like there's all these things that are part of my everyday life that support me to be the healthiest person that I can be. But now for somebody that's listening to this and they've never heard of any of these treatment options, you alluded to a few of them a moment ago, and I want to dive into them, but I don't want to put words into your mouth. So I'm going to just ask you the question and allow you to take us down the journey. But if somebody's listening to this and they've never really done anything additional for their health and well-being, and I want to preface for a second. So maybe they go to the gym a couple times a week and they think they're eating pretty clean. What would be a really good place for them to start? What would you recommend that somebody do as the foundational deep dive into understanding where is their health, or where do they want to go, or what markers should they be aware of?
This is a good question, Rudi. I think the beauty of this is most of lifestyle or most of health optimization comes with very little financial cost. So that's the good thing. The bad thing is where you're going to get most of the bang for your buck for driving that needle in terms of health optimization. Now, I'm going to preface it by this. If you're already doing what I'm about to say, then we're talking about a completely different field. But let's say 95% of health optimization requires consistent work and effort. And what I mean by that is to optimize your lifestyle tactics. So the lifestyle tactics that I include are getting good quality sleep, which I think for most people is probably the lowest hanging fruit and the thing that they can do to see results in all facets of their life. Energy, metabolism, cognition, function, all of these things. Most people do not get good quality sleep because they feel as though, I still think, at least in Western society, especially United States, we have this stigma that we sleep whenever we're dead. If you are getting good quality sleep, that means that you may be lazy, but that could be the furthest thing from the truth. I don't care how busy you are. If you're not putting sleep optimization as one of your primary goals, you can do all the cold plunging and stem cells that you want. It's not even close to the benefits that you get from getting good quality sleep on a nightly basis. So I always tell people that's the lowest hanging fruit. It's probably it's the easiest thing to try. It's hard to implement for some people because it requires good sleep hygiene, et cetera. Some people have sleeping issues. So we can dive deep into that. If you decide to work with me, we can work around, do different things and supplements, et cetera, to help. But sleep, number one. And then you alluded to exercise. Yes, I think consistent exercise for building good, lean muscle mass is important, not only for improving what we call your health span, your quality of life, especially as you age, because being strong is very important, especially for fall prevention. You fall, break your hip past the age of 75, you have, greater than a 25% risk of mortality within 1 year of breaking that hip. So if you're strong and you can brace your fall, or at least blunt that fall, you're going to avoid major injuries. Not to mention having a large reservoir of muscle mass is very good for your metabolism. It's a kitchen sink for glucose. So it's going to be a buffer for things like insulin resistance. So can't preface exercise, muscle mass, strength building, as well as mobility training to help keep you in the game, avoiding injury. And, cardiovascular endurance, like things like increasing your VO2 max, which is probably a buzzword that you've heard a lot of. That is the number one biomarker out there that links, that if you categorize it, that predicts your lifespan much more than anything other biomarker that's out there, because all of your systems need to be functioning optimally to have a high VO2 max. If you think about it, cognitively, cardiorespiratory, muscles, everything needs to be functioning at its optimal level to get to that highest VO2 max. So outside of exercise, we talked about nutrition. I'm a little bit different when it comes to nutrition. Yes. Do I eat healthy whole food diet? I do. I always have, but I think for the average person, focusing on specific ingredients, outside of getting adequate protein, a good amount of fiber in your diet, make sure you're getting probiotics as well. If you can focus on those three things, but if you're overweight, and you have a lot of organ fat or visceral fat, getting into a caloric deficit any way possible to getting to that ideal body weight is way, way, way more important than focusing on certain ingredients, seed oils, food dyes, etc., all that stuff, because fat tissue itself, when it gets in the organs, does so many bad things. It's a endocrine organ in itself that causes inflammation, insulin resistance, all these things. So you could cherry pick and get the freshest, most organic produce, glyphosate free, all these things. But if you're overweight and you're not dialing in on that first, that's not nearly as important. So not that this other stuff is not important. And I'm saying you have to kind of graduate to levels, but for someone that's starting out, getting to an ideal body weight by any means necessary is way more important than stressing out about certain ingredients, especially certain foods that are a lot more expensive than others. Do a plan that you can stick to, get, adequate protein, fiber, and get to an ideal body weight. So from a food and diet perspective, that's where I stand. And then see what else. And then last thing would be, and this is really important for me, as I've progressed through this whole process and being an emergency medicine physician, your emotional health is very, very, very important, not only for your longevity, but your health span and just your quality of life. If you're not present and grateful, what's the point for all of this? If you don't have a sense of purpose, all these things contribute to not only your mental health, but your mental health sends signals to your body to help with everything else going on inside your body. So if you're not in a good mental state, your body will suffer from that. So I always preface by having an outlet. So whether you journal, meditate, whatever it may be, you need to have an outlet for stress and sense of purpose. So all those things combined, if you're doing all of that, and I tell people this all the time, you're in the top 1% of the world population if you're doing all those things on a consistent basis. And that's way more important than to start than taking some of these newer techniques that are out there that may or may not be available to the average person. But starting there, you're going to be well on your way. So I tell people, especially people that are overwhelmed with all these different things and potions and things that are out there, start with the basics. Do that stuff first. You're going to see if you're doing it consistently, you're going to see the most results, not only from how you feel, how you look, but from a biomarker standpoint, from all the panel blood works that I do, you're going to drive that needle. And then, I'm sorry, I'm talking a bunch. The last thing that I think is kind of the icing on the cake that I think needs to be addressed is hormone optimization, especially as we age. Hormone optimization, I call that more of a longevity drug because that also hits so many different organ systems in our, and if we know that hormones drop, with women, it's like clockwork. As soon as you hit menopause, estrogen, progesterone are gone, and you need those. So maintaining that. And then men, it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily the numbers, it's how you feel, but those decline varying, based on your genetics and environmental factors. So, but those need to be optimized as well. You don't need to accept the fact that they decline as we age. We need to maintain those levels to that of whenever we were in our mid-20s, whenever they were optimal. So if you're doing all those things, you're way ahead of everybody.
So you mentioned a little earlier, before I asked my question, you had mentioned that you did genetic testing. So how important is genetic testing in the work that you do with your patients?
I'd say it's important. I'm not a geneticist. I think this is still an emerging field in terms of how we use it. I think for some people, some things can potentially stand out and be very useful. Like you can do, for example, I'll just so people have a tangible idea of how I use it. Like for me, for example, for whatever reason, I have, my blood work always showed up that my LDL cholesterol, and then now I use ApoB, which is a much more accurate marker for the number of particles that can contribute to plaque in your arteries. It always seemed to be much higher than national average, despite me eating what I thought was a clean diet, eating whole-based foods at an ideal body weight. And through my genetic testing, I could see through the SNPs, which are single nucleotide polymorphisms, through a number of those that I'm extremely sensitive to saturated fats. Most people are, that will drive up ApoB, but to varying degrees. For me, very, very sensitive. So as soon as I saw that, and then I targeted in my diet to really lower my saturated fat intake to as much as you can't eliminate, because even kale has some saturated fat in it. But just being very mindful of those things, I was able to get it down to a much lower level. Some people can eat a lot more than others. They can eat bacon regularly and it doesn't do as much. But for me, I was very sensitive. So that's one thing.
So I'm super curious, not part of my original thought of questioning, but, seeing as you've touched on the topic, I would love to know, like, my health, if you look at me from a physiological standpoint, extremely healthy. I had alluded in the beginning of the episode, I had got I got sepsis. And so I had jumped into a body of water, it had got into my bloodstream, and I went undiagnosed for almost 5 weeks, or misdiagnosed, and I got really, really sick. Anyhow, that's not something you can plan or prepare for. But the rest of me, if you look at my day-to-day, my life markers, I'm doing majority of what, not everything, majority of what it is that you were suggesting. And the one thing that's thrown off on all of my markers is my, cholesterol levels are extremely high. And yet I eat a very, very clean diet. My doctor, standard GP, he's like, oh, I want to put you on cholesterol medicine, which is just ludicrous to me because, that's another podcast conversation. But my question to you is, if I have such high cholesterol, yet I do eat so clean and pure, then what would be your advice to me or someone listening to the show that is maybe in a similar situation?
That's a very complicated question. So lipidology, which is something that I've gravitated towards, is very complex. So so we understand the language real quick, I don't like to use the word cholesterol anymore because so cholesterol it's found inside these particles, right? HDL has cholesterol, which is quote unquote good cholesterol, LDL, the bad, but it's not the cholesterol itself. It's the particles that are shuttling the cholesterol that we should be most concerned about. So there are many people that when we are seeing this now, and especially through the fact that the obesity pandemic, that people actually, when they check their LDL cholesterol, which is the concentration of cholesterol inside these particles, which is now much more of a blunt, less accurate tool, their LDL cholesterol is actually, a lot of people, it's not considered high from what our guidelines show. But the problem is with insulin resistance, when people become more insulin resistant, this is not always the case, but it's a common trend that their LDL particle numbers actually decrease in size. So they're holding less cholesterol inside. So this is what we call a discordance. So meaning that they actually have a high level of LDL particles still, but they have low cholesterol because they have less cholesterol inside those particles. So when you get the LDL-C test, oh, my cholesterol is fine, but you're not low risk. You're actually high risk because it's the particles themselves that are going inside the walls, which is much more important than the cholesterol itself. So that's one thing that I want to kind of clear the air about. So we use ApoB. ApoB solves all of this because it tags all of the particles themselves, all of the bad particles, whether they're big, small, irrespective of the amount of cholesterol that's in them. So what someone should ask themselves when they are getting these tests, they're sensitive to this or that, what is your ApoB level? If your ApoB level is high, then that's a different story. But if your cholesterol could be high, but you could have a low particle number and you could be lower risk. It's not the norm, but it's definitely possible. And I see it. So getting the right test is the first place to start. But for someone that has high levels of ApoB, which is probably what you're alluding to, what are some natural ways that you can do to lower it? One, we know, like I talked about, saturated fat is definitely a huge driver in that. And some people more sensitive than others, but I would really limit your saturated fat intake.
So can you give us examples of what that would be? Like in a standard American fridge?
So, and this is the one that most people don't like to hear it, but most meat, especially fatty meat, regardless if it's an excellent, so I'm not discounting that it's extremely nutritious food and great sources of protein, even grass-fed, it doesn't matter. Most meat is going to be high in saturated fat. Even filet is going to have a good amount of saturated fat in it. So not saying not to eat it, but it shouldn't be, if someone has high ApoB, they shouldn't be eating steak every day. Other things are palm oils. So, your coconut oils is high in saturated fat. Interesting enough, not all saturated fats are created equal. So something like dark chocolate, which is really rich in polyphenols and antioxidants, has stearic acid in it, which is high. It's a saturated fat, but that actually does not raise ApoB levels. So not all saturated fats are created equal, but the ones, unfortunately, in palm oils, butter, ghee, and meat are very high in saturated fat. So yeah, that's really the only molecule that I'm like, you really should pay attention to whenever we're diving into foods in terms of what you should potentially, reduce or eliminate as much as you can if your ApoB levels are high. But some people, it doesn't affect them much. I'm not saying don't eat these things. Canola oil has primarily unsaturated fats in it. It has omega-6 linoleic acid in it. And it also has some monounsaturated fat and some omega-3 in it. But primarily it's omega-6. But the studies show that when you have a lot more omega-6 compared to saturated fat, not only does it decrease cardiovascular risk by way of lowering ApoB, it improves insulin sensitivity. And it also helps manage liver fat better. So that's why I don't like to talk about foods, because I don't really care. I don't care one way or the other, whether you eat seed oils or you don't. I don't use them. I hardly even cook with oils at all. So none of these foods are essential in our diet, right? But what I'm saying is this is where I'd hate to see people that are thinking just because seed oils are, highly processed and therefore may contain some chemicals that could potentially be harmful, and you're swapping that with something like butter or ghee, you're actually causing much more harm. So my thought is, you don't want to do seed oils, fine. Olive oil, avocado oil, great options. But don't switch. If you were using seed oils, then don't switch it for butter or ghee. Do something like an olive oil or avocado oil, which are very rich in monounsaturated fats, not saturated fats. Also have, high quality antioxidants. But back to ApoB, yes. So getting to an ideal body weight, lowering your saturated fat intake. And that's really the most of what you can do from, like a nutrition standpoint in terms of lowering your ApoB.
So I want to go back a second and just acknowledge everything you just said. And thank you so much. I'm sure so many people can find value in that because, you know, I've mentioned 3 times now that there's so much information that is out there on social media, and you never know who is a real expert and who's just regurgitating somebody else's information that may or may not be accurate. And there's obviously a massive campaign against seed oils right now being processed. I am 100% guilty for replacing all seed oil with ghee and butter, which obviously I'm learning today is adding to the cholesterol levels. But I want to go back to the audience that's looking to take an improved quality of life. They want to have longevity. They want to have a better living environment. And you've mentioned now a number of things that we can do. So sleep optimization, obviously exercise, stretching and moving the muscles, cardiovascular work. You spoke about VO2 mass, nutrition, emotional intelligence, as well as obviously hormone levels. But I'd love to just dive in a little bit into each one of these topics just briefly. And some of them we already have, so we can skip over them. But I want the audience to better understand what it is that you do and why they should have an interest in looking into this a little more. So for somebody who's never heard of sleep hygiene or sleep optimization, you know, where would be a good place for them to start, or where do you start someone when they start working with you?
Sure. So I have, fortunately, I have a health and wellness coach that kind of helps me with the lifestyle tactics. And then we dive in deep. I have a sleep questionnaire that I ask patients to get an idea of where they're at with their sleep. But when I say good sleep hygiene, and unfortunately for me, it's difficult to do this. So it's a challenge working in the ER half the time because I do block schedule. I work 6 shifts in a row and then I'm off for like 8-10 days and I do another 6 and I work days, afternoons, and I don't work overnight shifts anymore. I told them no, but I still work evening shifts. So I work until 3 or 4 in the morning. But if your job or your environment allows you, going to bed around the same time every night is very, very important for sleep hygiene. Your body wants to be in routine. And the sooner that you do that, the easier it will be to go to bed at the same time and get proper amount of sleep. Also, with the technology that we have, avoiding blue light, especially an hour or so before sleep, shutting down your work an hour, if not more, before you go to sleep is very important. And this is all for your circadian rhythm because, you know, as it gets dark outside, our melatonin levels rise. In order to trigger that, we have to, eliminate sources of light, and blue light can trick us and can dampen the melatonin response. So, that's another thing. Getting your area as dark as possible. So black shades. If you don't have black shades, use a sleep mask. I do this thing. You also want to get to an optimum body temperature. Your temperature drops about 2 degrees when you sleep at nighttime. So helping your body get there quicker kind of sends the signal to your body, hey, it's sleep time. So I'll take a hot shower at nighttime, get out of the shower, causes this big thermal dump with vasodilation, helps drop the core of your body temperature. I use this thing called a chili pad, which is I put on my mattress where I can get it cool on my side. My girlfriend likes it warm, so we don't have any issues. I can crank it down all the way and it doesn't affect her. What else? Sometimes, if it's, I'm in an environment where it's a little bit noisy and I can't control noise as much, I'll either put earplugs in or I'll put on 432 hertz music. It's like this supposed to be, I don't know if there's science behind it. From what I read, it helps to create more of a calming effect on your body. So I may have that, or white noise. So I think all those things combined, getting really the most important thing is just like anything else, creating a schedule. I'm going to be going to bed at this time. So you need to shut off. You have to shut things off. You can't have your phone sitting there right before you go to bed. That's probably the hardest things, especially for most Americans. Getting rid of the electronics and you got to do it for at least 60 minutes to help wind down.
So I hope everybody follows that to a T, because I just cannot speak into how important it is to do each and every single one of those. We've mentioned it on previous podcast episodes. We sleep with the 8 sleep, which controls and regulates your body temperature while you're sleeping, tracks and measures all of your biomarkers, so you can tell whether you had deep sleep, or how much REM sleep that you had, which is vital. And then you can also start to see how well you're doing. Then there's the 3-2-1 rule: no food 3 hours before bed, no critical thinking 2 hours before bed, and no blue light 1 hour before bed sets you up for maximum blue light. And so I want to move on to, exercise. I think, we pretty much have covered. People know they need to work out. They know the value and the importance of it. I just want to stress that, the aging of the body is really, people stop lifting weights, they stop taxing their muscles. And so, we can do cardio, but we need to actually lift weight. And I see it, in my parents that are just getting older and more frail. And it's like they've stopped lifting heavy things. And that's what we need for longevity. But obviously it's a matter of just putting in and doing the work. You did mention VO2 mass, and I'm sure that a lot of people are not familiar with VO2 mass. What does that mean? How do you do it? Like, assuming I started working with you today, what would that look like?
So there are actually, if you have a smart watch, I know the Apple Watch has a VO2 max reader. It doesn't calculate based on a true VO2 max. It guesstimates it based on some of the physical activity that you do through workouts and stuff. And it's actually, I've done true VO2 max tests. It's fairly accurate. I think the most important thing is just to do it, or however you're going to test it, do it consistently and use the same device each time to gauge your progress. So what VO2 max is essentially how well your body is utilizing oxygen to its maximum capability. So when you breathe in, how much oxygen your lungs can breathe in, convert it over into the bloodstream and use it for oxidative phosphorylation. For essentially what that means is everything, oxygen is like our ultimate recipient of energy. And we convert chemical energy to electrical energy and back in our body. But oxygen, we breathe it in and it goes into our bloodstream and it goes to our little things called the mitochondria. And mitochondria accept all these oxygen has electrons in it. And essentially what VO2 max means is it's the maximum level of oxygen that we can use to convert oxygen into energy. And once it surpasses that point, once you're going past a certain heart rate and the amount that you can breathe, you can only go so far, and then it converts over into anaerobic respiration, or like when you start building up lactic acid. So that's when you get on one of these treadmills and you have the mask on, it's looking to see how well you are converting, protein, carbohydrates, and fat into energy. And the idea being that, you can see once you hit your VO2 max, you stop, converting energy in this efficient manner. And it comes up with this number, or you start converting over from, like carbohydrates and fat from the oxygen, and then it shunts it over to lactate from not using oxygen anymore. So your lactate really starts to rise, like you would see with HIIT workouts, etc. But that marker, like you can check it, and don't quote me on the numbers, but of what's considered good, or average, good, excellent, and elite. You want to strive to be the furthest end possible, because it requires so much from, like I said, all of your organ systems to make that be in sync to get to that level. And if you're able to maintain that, that means that you're in really, really good health. That's why we use it as a biomarker.
So you mentioned, in addition to nutrition and emotional health, I love to refer to it as emotional intelligence, obviously very much spoken, by wide groups of circles. So I think we have a greater understanding there. But you mentioned also just looking into the hormone levels of an individual. So do you do like hormone testing with all of your patients?
Not only do I do hormone testing through biomarkers, but I do detailed questionnaires of the key hormones in our body. So thyroid, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So some of these hormones, we base our therapy off of numbers, and some of them we base them off of symptoms. And the one that we primarily base off of symptoms are testosterone, for both men and women. Also thyroid too, to an extent, because the reason why we do that is these tests don't necessarily always show us what's going on at a cellular level. It can tell you what level you're at in the bloodstream, but if you have dysfunction in the cell and you're symptomatic, then the numbers really mean nothing. So I think often we really do underutilize hormones, and we're not taught in medical training how to optimize hormones. It's all about hormone replacement. I don't look at it as hormone replacement. I look at it as hormone optimization, because nobody wants to be within normal limits. We want to be optimal, especially if these hormones are doing so many amazing things in our body.
So what symptoms would somebody have? That you had mentioned that you would do a questionnaire more on symptoms. So if you were checking somebody's testosterone, if they had low levels of testosterone, male or female, what would be some of the symptoms?
So they overlap. Biggest ones being, loss of libido, even some erectile dysfunction, decreased focus, decreased energy, decreased muscle mass. These are all just symptoms. But not only do I see symptoms, I see biomarker changes as well. So testosterone, it really is a wonder drug. And that's why I put it in as what we call geroprotective, meaning it's a longevity drug. It just touches so many facets of all of your organ systems. If your testosterone is optimized, you're going to optimize your lipid levels. Like, I'm not going to go into the details of, it will improve HDL, lower LDL cholesterol. It will lower your blood pressure. It decreases your risk for dementia. It optimizes muscle mass. It decreases visceral fat, the organ fat. So therefore, if you're decreasing organ fat, you're improving your insulin sensitivity and decreasing risk for metabolic syndrome. Another thing that women don't appreciate with testosterone is it increases collagen production. So it's going to improve skin elasticity. And it will not make you, a lot of people ask me, I'm going to be on this, so I'm going to get really big and muscly and I'm going to look great, right? Well, technically no, because if you're not putting the work, it doesn't build muscle. It does increase, protein muscle synthesis, but you have to put in the work and you have to have the building blocks. You got to eat the protein and you have to exercise. But one nice thing about testosterone is it makes things that seem hard pleasurable. Like, I don't want to do this. It's like, I want to do this now. And that's one thing that I think, especially for a lot of people that I see have really struggle in the gym, and they get in the gym and they're on testosterone and it's optimized. They love it. They enjoy going to the gym now. And testosterone gives you that motivation, which I think is really unique to that drug.
Well, Dr. Joel Wussow, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I have a really important closing question that is so self-explanatory, but I have to ask it anyway, because I think for the benefit of the audience, we need to hear information so many different ways. Obviously, you speak into a beautiful formula of how we can optimize ourselves and optimize our lives so that we can have longevity. You work in two beautiful fields within the same area. One obviously being an emergency doctor, so you're in the ER, and then you help people and prevent them from getting into the ER. How many of the people that you see on a day-to-day basis do you think could prevent a visit to the ER if they were doing this kind of work?
From a medical visit, because I work in a large trauma center. So just let's strictly talking about medical patients. That's a great question. I would say the majority of them. Definitely majority of those that are coming in with chronic disease. And and it is kind of a loaded question because, socioeconomic status has a lot to do with it. But I'm just saying, if somehow that we could, dedicate some time to allow for education, just a little bit of education for everyone. And which is, I'm not optimistic the way insurance companies are incentivized right now, but if there was a way that we could have this paradigm shift, and that's what I'm trying to do, is by just providing, I love talking about this stuff with patients. I could talk all day with people about this. If people just had a little bit of time and education, just like they get education on how you don't, learn in grade school how to do your taxes, but you got to learn, right? So same thing with your health. Why is it that people are learning about their health at the point when they already have chronic disease? So there's something wrong with that picture. We need to be learning about it much sooner so that it can be managed, reversed, prevented, all of these things. And I think it can be done, and I think it will be done. Hopefully, I can see there's a shift in healthcare right now, and I feel like a lot of people are excited about health, and the more and more we talk about it, and more you have podcasts like this getting people excited and motivated. It should be fun, sexy to be healthy, right? I think with that type of energy, I think we can make a difference.
I love so much how you chose to answer that question. And I knew that the response would be the majority of people. And I wanted to ask that question because I really wanted the audience to sit with that for a second. That if you are sitting in any place right now where you are not in perfect health, you're struggling with something, that you still have the power to create a shift in you. And it's not always going to be this external thing, this drug. And I'm not saying don't do the medicine, don't follow your doctor's prescriptions, but there's other things that you can add in. I want to also point something out, Joel. What I love about what you're doing is you're giving a robust map to how to live healthy. And so many people leave my field out, which is the emotional health. And you bring that into the work that you're doing as the sixth step. And it is so vitally important that people take care of all aspects of their life, not just one aspect, because you can cut out the seed oil, but if you're eating too much of something else, or if you only lifting weights, but you're not doing cardio, or if you, not sleeping well, but there's so many things that are the knock-on effects. And highly recommend that people go back and revisit this episode so that they can gain so much information from you. If somebody wants to work with you, how can they find you? Obviously, we're going to be adding all of your links to your website, Instagram, and all to the show notes. But what would be the best way for somebody to stay in touch with you?
So, so on all my social platforms, it's Dr. underscore, or actually it's Dr. Joel MD. I forgot where the underscore is. It's somewhere in there. And then my website is healthspanbydesign.co, not com, but .co. And I've got just education on there as well. And you can just subscribe to a weekly newsletter just to learn about health and longevity if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time. And more than anything, I love what you're doing out in the world. And it is so needed more now, I think, than ever before, especially considering with all of the misinformation that's out there, that to have someone to go to give you the actual information, the facts as it is just such a beautiful thing to see. So thank you so much. To everyone that listened to the InPowered Life podcast, man, we freaking love you and want to remind you that you have the power and the potential to have and to be and to do and to achieve anything in life. But if you don't have your health, you have nothing. And I hope that you take that message today and apply it into your life so that you can live and achieve your highest and your greatest potential. We'll catch you in the next episode of the InPowered Life podcast. Goodbye, everybody.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.